Greetings and welcome back to yet another episode of Dark Souls. We were in the depths the last time we left off, and now we will continue our journey through these darkened caves. I replaced my weapon from the mail breaker to this maze thingy, just because I think the mail breaker... not only did I... Whoa. I really thought I was gonna die there. Alright. Are you kidding me? There we go. First of all, because I used the mail breaker in the previous episodes already, and I did beat the boss once, and I didn't really show this weapon, so instead of just using one and kind of torturing myself with it that way, I just decided maybe it's a good idea to swap it around and use this one until I find a new weapon. This is sort of a cleric weapon in some regards, although no classes really have their own weapons, but it's definitely a one-handed mace weapon, which do have a special type of damage. So in this case, I believe that there are a few types of damage that exist. One of them is piercing or something like that, one of them is blunt type of damage, and obviously one of those is greater against humanoids and armored enemies than other, and that's basically all there is to it. I'm not really sure about the details or maybe what to use in some situations and whatnot. It doesn't make that big of a difference. At least not to the fact that you should be replacing it, because it's always a better idea. But like I said in my previous episode, it doesn't really depend on which weapon you use, it's important just that you upgrade it properly, and that should actually carry you through the whole game. I know that there are a few slimes on the ceiling here and they can drop down, or maybe they're not here, but I'm just kind of being careful. I'm trying to lure the rats, but they seem to be backing off. The slimes are incredibly tanky. I think they're very weak against pyromancy, but sadly we don't really have any of that. We really can't use pyromancy at this point. Well, we could have if we went back to the Firelink Shrine, because we saved that pyromancer from the barrel, if you remember. But at this point, we really can't do anything against them except like hit them 15,000 times. One thing that I didn't really mention is that weapons in this game have durability, and you have to repair them. So essentially, every weapon can break if you use it too much, and when it does break, obviously you can't use it anymore. At least you can use it, but you're not doing any damage. So for that reason, you need to either repair your weapons or just kind of constantly keep switching them so you can keep using that so it doesn't break. Because like I said, when it does break, you're left in some very hairy situations. I really thought that there were going to be more slimes there, but I don't see them, so we'll just ignore those. We have a merchant here in some regard. He trades a bunch of really cool stuff, and maybe the what he's known the most for is when you beat a certain boss, or at least a certain type of boss, he will give you their armor here, and you can buy that. That's pretty cool, because then you can essentially cosplay or roleplay as that particular boss, and that's always fun. Alright, let's go down the stairs. It's really dark down in here. I guess Dark Souls in general is pretty dark, and not only because of the name, but also because of how everything is. I know that if I go right down here, it's not gonna be a good idea. Down there you can see it's pretty big, it's a boss area, but up there is like a channeler, which I would like to kill first, because otherwise he can be quite annoying. I just have to remember where to actually go in order to get to him. I think we can get to him from above if I just kind of take the doors, but I have to remember where that is. It can't be that hard to find, I've done it a million times before. One thing that's really great about Dark Souls to me is, even though its level design is very maze-like, has a lot of verticality, I still somehow manage to find my way through most often than not. I tend to not get lost. I'm a very bad person with orientation and like where things are in the environment, and I kind of have a poor perspective of how much I've moved and maybe where a particular places or whatever. But the fact that Dark Souls, even though it's very maze-like and you can get lost quite easily, somehow I still manage to find my way through. I guess that's just... Okay, if I get poisoned here, it's not gonna be okay. I need to go rest back at the bonfire. There's no way I'm gonna get rid of this poison. The problem with poison in this game is that when you actually get it, at least in Dark Souls 1, you either have to eat a moss to make it go away, or you have to wait it out, and waiting it out is a bad idea because it ticks so slowly and it does so much damage that it can kill you a few times over before you actually can heal yourself, so we would end up wasting all of our Estus Flask just to stay alive, which is obviously not something that you want. So what we do is just rest at the bonfire, and that magically cures the poison and puts it away. I'll just parry this guy. It feels so much better to use a weapon which deals damage, even though it's not a lot of damage. It's just nice that I don't have to hit him like 15 times in order to kill him. I was talking about level design, and yeah, even though I get lost easily in like real life or maybe with other games, the fact I don't really get lost in Dark Souls, I think, is just indication that the levels are designed well. Even though they're maze-like, they do have their own sort of pathing, which just makes sense as to where to go. So obviously, when you see a lot of enemies, that's a tell, and you know where to go from there. Like in this case, I remember fighting these rats a million times before, like, but if you ask me in a particular situation, oh, we got a great axe, I guess we have to use that. Can we? Oh no, we can't, we don't have enough strength or something to carry it, so we'll just remain on our Morning Star. Can't really complain too much about that. So yeah, I think it's a good. I'm not really sure as to. I was trying to say that when you see enemies, even though I fought those rats so many times, just the fact I know that when you see the rats, you're going in the right direction to actually progress forward. Is a good idea to know what your state is, especially with these later areas. I guess that they're not that much later, but obviously I did beat the tutorial the most amount of times, just because naturally you tend to repeat or maybe start over a few times, and for that reason you do play the earlier parts of the game multiple times. But in this particular case, okay, but in this particular case, even the later parts of the game are kind of designed in a way where you really can get lost, and I really like that, and I said that maybe a few too many times. But here we are at the fog gate, white light. I don't know why some say white light and some say fog gate. That has to be intentional. From what I know, it doesn't really correlate to whether there's a boss or not. So like if it said white light, you know there's no boss, but if it said a fog gate, there is a boss. At least I think they're not correlated, but I do think they're kind of just mixed around. And again, that's maybe just purposeful, so you kind of get confused to some degree. I hated the fact that he's just gonna stand there, so I'm just gonna... Whoa, that almost killed him. Like, and up until this playthrough, I didn't realize just how strong these fire bombs are. And how weak some of the weapons in this game are. These are giant rats, which are a bit bigger than regular rats. Obviously, they have more HP, they also do more damage, I believe. They're just harder to deal with, honestly. And, oh god. And I believe they can poison you much faster. We don't really necessarily have to kill them. What's important here is the channeler has died. Channeler, yeah. I think I was holding my block button. How the hell did that hit me? That was odd, because I was holding my block button and I swear the rat actually jumped into the shield. But I guess he didn't, whatever. We don't really, like I said, have to go back. I will go back just to kind of explore the rest of it. I don't really want to just go to the boss in this case. I'll kill the rats first, because that was odd. What can you do about it? I hate killing these guys. I said that before and I'm gonna say it again. They're so unpredictable. Where should we? I don't have to deal with those rats. I'm just afraid that they'll follow me. That's what happens sometimes. When you ignore some enemies, or at least you think you can ignore some enemies, then they end up following you. And this sneaky rat in the chest or in the box always gets me. I wish there was some sort of an X-ray vision in this game, so you can kind of see through boxes and walls and things like that. I think that would be at least a neat idea, if nothing else. I'll try to ignore these rats too. They seem to be minding their own business, so we really should be minding our own business as well. I think the rats don't hit you unless they're cornered, so that's the reason why the first rat when you see in the game, which is in the Firelink Shrine, is kind of in a small place, so that it attacks you only if you chase it. It doesn't just attack you outright like other enemies do. Baiting them one by one is going to be much easier. Can you please undo that? One thing that's very important in this game is that when you do enough damage, you want to stagger the enemies. When you stagger the enemies, it becomes so much easier to deal with them, because you can chain attacks and essentially kill them in one combo or one chain of attacks. Like in this case, when... Okay, I need to pick my thumb. Oh, it attacks so fast. I'll bait an attack and heal. So when I hit her, you can see that the rat kind of bounces back because of the damage I did to it. And because of that, it can't attack me in that time window or that time frame, so I can attack it again. And because it only takes 2 hits to kill them, that's probably a pretty effective way to actually get rid of them. But if you don't do enough damage, like with the Mailbreaker in the previous episodes, then you're just left in a situation where you need either to have a shield up and just block for days, or just really pick your timing well to actually deal with enemies. And when you do that, obviously you do tend to get hit just a bit more often. One thing that I was really afraid when I was playing this game for the first time, well, not really for the first time, I said the first few times, when I really wasn't maybe not available with the mechanics. I'm trying to say I wasn't really comfortable with the mechanics. I think that's a good word. Don't attack me? Will it attack me? I'm not sure. I don't think so. I wasn't really comfortable with the mechanics, so for that reason I decided... I was really afraid to use my Estus Flask, and because you really shouldn't be afraid to use Estus Flask. I'm just afraid that Red's gonna actually come behind me. Nope. Okay. I was afraid to use my Estus Flask, and because of that, I always kind of held on top of them, and I just kind of walked around very carefully, always with my shield up. But now, when you actually know the locations of the bonfire, I do tend to just chuck them. Like, even in this case, I would use it just to be a little bit safer. Like, there's no reason not to use it. They're a resource which you can kind of get infinitely many times, and because of that you can afford to chuck them as much as you want in order to kind of just feel a bit safer, and you really shouldn't be afraid to use them. This is a hole which you don't want to fall down, and if you want to make this jump, I think we have to be at 30 frames per second. This is something that I haven't mentioned before, and sorry for the choppy footage. Oh, there's something here. Green Titan chart, that's pretty good. This is something that I haven't mentioned before. Oh, there we go. But I'm playing this with a mod called DSFix, and what this mod does is improve your not only frame rate, but also just how the game looks like. Oh, there's the giant red. We looped around. Okay, I said in one of the previous videos if I don't know if this is the way to the giant red, and apparently there are multiple ways, and I do remember it now because I've did this path many times before. But yeah, I was talking about, I'm using a mod which not only improves your frame rate, but also improves just the visual fidelity of the game. So you have some more effects, you have some more anti-aliasing options, and things like that. It just makes the game look nicer. I think this is the only way we'll actually be able to beat the rat. We need to bait an attack and then hit them. I assume it's a her, no particular reason. Stupid, like this wall here is just in my way. There we go. So because of that, I'm running at 60 frames per second, and that might seem good because it looks good, it looks smooth, it's much easier for me to play and just makes the game feel, I guess, a bit better. But the problem is that because of how the game physics work in this game, there aren't a lot of maybe physically intensive mechanics in the game, but one of them is jumping, and you jump much further in 30 frames per second than 60, and this is just with how the game was coded. This is really nothing that we have any control over, but obviously because it's such a small part of the game, jumping, I mean, it's really not that prevalent. You don't really have to rely on it too much, so that's why it's okay to play at 60 frames per second. Like, this rat is not gonna die, but you know, like, this is Dark Souls. Dark Souls is not even about like getting better at the game, it's just getting better at cheesing the game, and just better at exploiting the enemy AI or maybe the positions in the game. And eventually we're gonna get there. I'm just kind of holding up my shield. If I didn't... Oh, that's the bleed. Yeah, right, I forgot that this particular weapon has a bleed counter. So like the enemies can poison you or bleed you, you can also do the same. And some enemies just have that innately built in. Like they're a fire weapon, for example, and you can burn enemies. I think that's one of the saddest effects that you can inflict, but there are effects like poison or venom, or in this case bleeding. And what bleeding does when you actually stack it up, or when you hit the enemy enough times, you bleed them out and you just do like a critical hit of damage. You see in this case, because the bleed bar filled up, we dealt an additional 230 damage with that particular hit, which is obviously quite a lot, but it's not something that you can necessarily exploit. It's good against some enemies, but some enemies like bosses can't even get bled, so it's not a mechanic that you will notice often, because most often you're just gonna end up killing enemies in 1 or 3 shots in general, so you're not really gonna have the chance to build up that bleed bar. But against mini bosses like this rat, it does come in handy, and I'm actually quite pleased that I picked this weapon in order to showcase this, even though it was accidental. Let me just chuck another Estus Flask, and I'll just bait the rat again. I like how the rat forgets in like half a second I'm here. Like, it charges me, like it's pissed off that I'm here. It attacks once and then it just goes away like nothing ever happened. Come on, rat. This is some right quality footage right here. Oh god, I'm getting greedy, aren't I? How is it not dead? Oh my god. go. Ooh, I was really afraid I was gonna die there. Okay, we killed the rat, we got a humanity, which is always good. And I believe this rat doesn't respawn because it is classified as a sort of a mini-boss, so that is the only time we actually have to deal with it. It's not that difficult. If you want to fight it just like one-on-one, it can be quite a doozy just because of how it moves. It has some very quick animations, doesn't have a lot of attacks, but it can be quite annoying, so for that reason I decided to kind of stay off it for a little bit. So let's go back to the bonfire to kind of regen our health, and I might end up calling this episode over here. I intend to finding a boss in the next one, and to do that, I just really want to kind of space them out. I don't want to have maybe a boss battle in every single episode, so this might be a good idea to actually say that's it, and just kind of continue with the boss later. Or maybe I might fight the boss and then go to the Blight Town in the next episode. I'm not sure. You know what, let's fight the boss. Nobody was hurt by having a bit of a longer episode, even though it's vitality. Sure, let's take some vitality. One problem is that even when you increase vitality, just the fact that you're limited with your Estus flasks means that it doesn't really have an effect towards, or maybe past a certain point, and I definitely should be increasing something like strength so I can maybe wield more weapons, or endurance, because stamina is always great. Oh my god, these guys, I hate them so much. So when you're actually in that position, having like 5000 HP doesn't really help you when SS Flask only heals you for 1000. Sure, it's nice to be just a bit more safe when you're dealing with enemies to have more HP so you don't die maybe in 1 or 2 shots, but the fact you have a very limited amount of healing means that even if you have more HP, that's not necessarily gonna help you. I was kinda hesitant to find this boss just because it's usually a pretty long boss battle, just because of how much HP it has. It's not really that of an interesting one, but I guess because this episode was sort of a boring one to some extent. Oh, where did this rat come from? Maybe from the left? It's super angry, so let's put it out of its misery. I'm kind of afraid to even go fight the boss now because I don't have that many SS flasks, but that boss shouldn't necessarily even be that big of a problem. Either it's gonna kill us immediately with one shot, or we're gonna kill it eventually. But yeah, it has a lot of HP, so it's kind of a long fight, so that's maybe why I decided not to do it. But I guess because this episode was kind of boring in some regard, we're just kind of exploring a bit, I might just end up doing it, because there's really no reason not to do it. Just kill the boss and be on our merry way forward. I really like this area though, because you're kind of locked in there in a very enclosed space, like in the sewers. Oh god, these rats, man. There we go. You're kind of locked in the sewers, and you're just in a very closed area, so when you come out, there's this giant open thing, and you can even see the fog gate from here. It just gives you an indication of what's to come. You know that something really big is gonna come out if you're gonna fight something in this particular area. So let's just make our way down. I believe there's like a bow here, but if I pick it up, I'll be forced to use it. I mean, I guess I can't use it since I don't really have any arrows. I have 11 heavy bolts. I guess that would classify, but I would really I would really have had to buy some bolts, because with 11 bolts, obviously with no ammo, we really can't deal with enemies at all, so we're just gonna stick with our Morning Star, and we might fight with a crossbow later on, maybe another boss, when I actually buy some bolts. I'll enter through this fog gate, you'll see the cutscene, and then we'll fight the boss. That's a bigger crocodile than you thought it was, right? So the plan is, when he stomps down, maybe you hit his head once or twice, or miss it, that's also okay, but when he stomps down, he will charge forward, and then you can actually slice his tail off. When I say slice, I really mean hit it with the blunt end of your weapon, and that's it. Oh, and again, this is always the problem with... I'll never do this with this damage. At least we didn't more damage than we did before to the previous boss. But truly, this boss is super easy to exploit. Like, as a fight, you just wait for it to slam its head down, you go around when he charges, and that's really all there is to it. One thing you have to be afraid of is just falling off of this edge here. But besides that, I would say this is one of the easiest bosses in the game. He really doesn't have any attacks or maybe any ranged attacks. The only other problem here would be the channeler up there. He would actually constantly be shooting at you if you were actually to leave him alive, so for that reason, that's why I got rid of him. If you hit its head, it does have a weak spot of sorts. You can see that we're dealing about 2 more damage, but you don't want to take too much time because he's gonna start charging forward, and if he does that, he's gonna be dealing a lot of damage. We found the identical armor set that we started out with, and just to be kind of safer, because he does move his tail, you probably want to hit him here, but you can chop off his tail, like I said. And when I say chop off, I really mean you can use any weapon. God damn it, I forgot about that attack. I didn't see him actually lifting his head up. And when he does multiple of them in a row, it becomes much easier. So I just hit him once in the head, he'll sneeze, he just go forward, and then we hit him in the tail. So I hope that this works out better than I expected it to. God damn it, his tail is so slippery. He does have a lot of HP, as you can see, and you know, that's kind of offset by the fact, again, he's a slow, you know, he can fly. I mean, I know he can fly, but he doesn't really do anything. He's a slow character, and for that he has a lot of HP. It's kind of to balance him off, but I really like the design, like his teeth just kind of pulling out of him, especially when he opens them up. It's such a, they're so shiny and they're just such a feast. He just seems so intimidating, and I really like about that in Dark Souls that a lot of the enemies just are super intimidating, like you're scared to fight them. I think that's great design. I knew I was gonna do that. So besides that, he can fly up, he can swipe his leg, arm, whatever, and he can do this attack and charge forward. I'm not really sure what are the other attacks that this guy has, even if he even has them. It might not be, but I know that some bosses, like they're balanced in a way that doesn't really make that isn't necessarily linear. So even when we fight a hard boss, a quick boss for example, it's not necessary that the next boss will be harder. It's kind of more of a lore intertwined, because obviously this guy is in the sewers, he eats a lot because of how much he ate, because of his I guess big mouth. I think he was like a guy, or not a guy, like a demon or of some sorts, and he was cursed because he ate too much with a giant mouth, which seems like to be kind of the wrong way to go about it, because if someone is addicted with cigarettes, you're not just gonna give them like a ton of cigarettes. Like this guy is addicted by eating, and then he just gets to eat more. Seems kind of odd, but you know. But the boss is very thematic because he lives in the sewers, he basically eats everything, and because he does eat everything, he has a giant mouth, or rather because he has a giant mouth, he does eat everything. And he's in the sewers, and not necessarily a slow boss, but obviously if he's gonna eat a lot, he's also gonna be quite big and slow, and it wouldn't really make a lot of sense if he was like a skinny, scrolly dude just kind of trying to kill you and be very fast, if he's supposed to eat a lot. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that bosses are not necessarily more difficult as you progress, but they are thematic, and that's really all there is to it. Especially with these lesser bosses, they're not really major bosses in the game, they're very much like just regular enemies, which seem to be tougher, even though it doesn't really seem, because obviously you don't see them a lot. But Gaping Dragon, and like especially the demons that we saw before, the Capra demon and the Taurus demon, they're just regular sized demons, so to say. That hit me. Wow, he does have a longer tail than I thought. They're just regular enemies in the game, so to say. They're not really anything spectacular, like nothing makes them special. It's just the fact that in that particular case they managed to go where they were and actually kind of infest the place. And I really like about the game. Obviously there are some special bosses which have a lot of lore significance. So like at the start, you know, if you remember, there was like elder dragons or immortal dragons, and then Seed betrayed them, and there were like 4 Lord Souls, and you can imagine that we're gonna encounter all of those people eventually, and I would consider obviously them just as a bit more important in the lore, and they are more significant bosses. But these enemies, like these bosses we're fighting now, are just basically pawns in the whole game. They're just really not anything spectacular. Like with any boss, it takes a long time, even though they're easy. It just the fact that you are hitting them for a longer time does result usually in you taking some unnecessary damage, usually because either you maybe forget an attack or maybe you forget the range of a certain attack, and just left in a position where you kind of have to optimize your movements. I forgot he can do that. You have to optimize your movements, so actually hitting in the right spots to try to maximize the damage you're actually dealing. So like in this case, I know you can hit him 4 times in the tail, they can back off. Maybe 5 is possible if I'm really fast. I try to be fast, but just because his stomping still deals damage. Not damage, but I guess it staggers me, so I really couldn't do anything. And I know I can hit him 2 times in the head, and that's quite a significant chunk of damage as well. Considering I do 144 damage when I actually hit him in the tail, that's quite comparable. And the fact I can deal like 400 damage to him every time he slams his head down, you can do the math how much total HP he has. In other words, way too much. But we're halfway there. One thing I didn't really talk about in this game is, if you remember, I talked to Solaire and he gave us a particular white sign soapstone. And a soapstone, white sign soapstone in this game allows you to summon other players into the game, or rather, you can be summoned into other worlds of the players. He didn't charge forward, that's odd. Oh, he's gonna do the spit attack. Oh, that I remember this one. It's the one that lags the game. Okay. And you can summon other players to help you out, and they will just kind of join as white phantoms, or they're called white phantoms. They're gonna come into your game and they're gonna help you fight the boss, or you can go into their world and help them fight their boss. And that's usually quite a good idea, especially against maybe harder bosses, and especially this one, not because he's necessarily harder, just because it's much easier to deal with him if you have multiple enemies at once. He's one of those attacks that really can't exploit, or just really isn't meant for multiple players to... Oh god. I thought I was out of range for that one, but I'll dodge. Heal and switch to my humanity, just in case. He can't, sadly he can't run off where he came from, which is a bit of a bummer. I think that would be quite a nice Easter egg. There we go, we chopped off his tail, eventually. Chopped off. I mean, you can imagine it takes a long time, especially with a blunt weapon like this, to chop something off, especially something as rigorous as this guy's tail. So when you summon other players into the game, they can help you fight the boss, and it's quite a nice experience. Especially there are like events that happen sometimes where people go back to playing Dark Souls 1, and that's usually a good time to catch some people online and you just kind of tag along and enjoy some jolly cooperation. It's really fun, and there are some NPC summons as well, which means that just in case maybe if you don't have an internet connection, they still put some NPCs in the game which you can summon and they can help you out. One maybe disadvantage of that is when you summon more phantoms, or maybe when more enemies are fighting the same boss, the boss tends to be harder, it has more HP basically, and because of that, I guess it's kind of balanced in a way, but it's really not, because these bosses are meant as single player encounters and all of their AI is revolved around that, so having one boss versus 3 players usually leads to some pretty exploitations by the players, and you can really kind of hit them, you can really kill them very fast. Like, so what players could do in this situation, 2 of them can go up with arrows from where the Chancellor was, and then they can hit them, and that's basically it. You're basically exploiting the strategy of the game against it. So one player can just be down here and can just kind of run around and hide, while the other 2 players snipe the dragon down, and eventually he's just gonna die, he really can't do anything. And a lot of the other encounters are that way as well. But NPC encounters are kind of dumb in some sense. It depends on which ones. Some are dumb because they don't really help you out that much, they just end up getting killed. And when they die, obviously, when they die they really can't do anything. But they still increase the Gaping Dragon's HP, so it becomes even harder to kill. So it's a weird position sometimes, you really don't want to summon NPCs even though it might help you. But I guess it's good because they can take the aggro away, and that's probably the main reason why you would want them in the game. But there are some NPCs which just tear ass. I'm gonna show you one, Iron Tarkus. If anybody knows Tarkus, you know what he is or what he does. He's kind of renowned for being one of the NPCs which are just very good, which can solo a boss, which is kind of crazy when you think about it, but it's nice that even some of these characters have some lore significance, I guess, that they're not equally useless or equally useful. That would be probably quite boring. But the fact that some of them are stronger than others does give them some more personality and character. I think that's quite nice. Okay, we're at the quarter health here, and man, it does become quite repetitive after a certain amount of time. I did never enjoy this boss in particular. It's a cool boss, like from a design standpoint, but just from a boss battle gameplay standpoint, he's one of the most dull bosses in the game, and I think it shows just by the fact that you really can't do anything. I do always wonder how they intend to balance these giant bosses, because what really can you do with a boss like this? How can you make him so that they have an interactive moveset which you can dodge and react, and they actually have a variety of different attacks which you can use on you, and you can still kind of dodge them if you're good enough. And I think there's really not a lot of ways you can go here, so for that reason I think that's you kind of force yourself from a design standpoint to go into a very narrow corridor where you really can't experiment too much. Just like this trope of a giant enemy charging you and just hitting their head in the wall and then you can hit them is something that existed in the games for the longest amount of time. But really, when you think about it, it's a very neat mechanic or a concept from a gameplay perspective, because you can see the charge, it requires you to do something, and if you dodge it successfully, you can exploit it and actually use it to your advantage. And it's one of those principles of game design that existed in the game since forever. At this point, it's maybe more of a trope than anything else, but it's still maybe a nice nod that these things exist, just because they are essentially a way to be very fair to the player. And this is exactly the same with Gaping Dragon, I think. Once you realize that this is a very exploitable attack that he does become trivial, and if you didn't realize it, you would maybe try to fight it like on the foot or whatever, and I would imagine that the fight is much harder in that case. But of course, because we are cheesy and because we're using weapons which I would usually never use, we're just gonna stick to some cheesy strategies sometimes. Maybe use some weapons, or maybe some advantages that the game gives us in order to beat the bosses. I won't feel too bad about it, because what just happened? Okay, that was grade A bullshit. How did that hit me? Like, I know I walked into the foot, but the foot like didn't stomp on me or anything. So how the hell did that do damage? Wow. Okay, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go back to the boss. I'll beat him. I'm not gonna show the whole fight again, because I think that might be quite boring. And I'll come back to you when the boss actually has a pretty low amount of HP. That might take some of the excitement out of it, but hey, what can you do? Rather show you a little bit less excitement as opposed to showing you that whole battle again. You probably got the gist about with the fight about what's going on already. So yeah, see you at the boss when he's actually low enough to beat. Welcome back to the fight, and I just did bring him very low, and this is probably gonna finish him off. There we go. Gaping Dragon is no more. That was exciting. As he says with the most monotonous voice he's ever conjured. We got twin humanities, because obviously that guy's pretty big, so he can't give us only one humanity. Has to be at least two. And I believe we can go through... No? I thought there was like an entrance here which we can go, but I guess not. Maybe this? No. I was sure that there was something to the left side of the wall, but oh no. I guess we just exit the area. So he that came out of there, we thought he was small, he was pretty big, he had a lot of HP, and with time and perseverance we managed to kill him off. And now we have to go back and rest. Like, a lot of the times, like, what I really enjoyed in Dark Souls 2, as opposed to Dark Souls 1, when you beat a boss, you did have that feeling of grandiose, you felt like you were progressing. And in this particular case, Gaping Dragon, I think, kind of falls short, just because even though when you kill him, I guess them, I said them because I got twin humanities, even though when you kill them, you just have to go back, basically. And that's kind of a disappointing procedure, I guess, to some extent, and I'm not the biggest fan of this, but what can you do? So we'll just get rid of this rat here. And where we have to go forward is Blight Town, and I might do it the normal way, but I'm not gonna, because I hate Bloodtown, and I think I'm not alone in that. So if you really wanted to go the fair way, we would go here, but remember, I have a master key, and because I have a master key, I can use a different pet. I'm gonna show you that one, because I think otherwise I'm not really gonna have a chance to. Well, you're gonna miss out on one or the other pet eventually, so it's either this one or the other one, but I like the other one much more, because it's not as heinous, and it's just much nicer to actually traverse. And I have to go back to the blacksmith to actually buy some things for me. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do. So without going too much, I'm actually gonna rest here. Next episode, we're gonna make our way out of the depths, out of the sewers, and then we're gonna actually go to Blight Town. So I hope you enjoyed this one, guys, and I hope to see you next time.